Hello, we are now going to be reading chapter 3, my favourite gravity. But before I do read that to you, I want you to think back to the first two chapters. What have you found out about our narrator, about his interests, likes and dislikes? What kind of experience might he have had in school based on what he said? We know that he's quite fascinated by stars and planets. And we also know that right now he's deep in space recording and talking directly into his phone, hoping that his parents receive the messages. So I will start onto chapter 3 now. It's called My Favorite Gravity. I don't think the world has vanished, but it is worrying not being able to see it. After all, Earth is where I keep all my stuff. Thinking about all my favorite bits, my mum and my dad, my bedroom, my computer, makes me feel a bit calmer. There's my massive Playmobil Viking ship that takes up half the floor, or used to take up half the floor. I put it back in its box the day I discovered I'd grown facial hair. I just thought that anyone with a beard, even just a wispy one, is probably too old for Playmobil. I say I discovered the facial hair. To be honest, I never noticed it because we've got energy-saving light bulbs in the bathroom. It was other people who pointed it out to me during the Year 6 Leavers outing to Enchantment Land. The most famous ride in Enchantment Land is the Cosmic. Interesting, that's also the title of our book. All the way there, on the coach, everyone kept on about how big it was and how scary. Everyone had a brother or a cousin who had been on it and never been the same again. In case you don't know, the Cosmic is a kind of metal cage with 2 seats in. It's attached to the top of a massive crane by kind of big elastic bands. They pull the cage down to the ground with a chain and fasten it with electromagnet. You sit inside and then they switch off the magnet. The elastic catapults you into the air, so almost thrusts you into the air, and then snaps you back towards the ground again. Then you bounce up and down for a while. It's only frightening for about 10 seconds, but for those 10 seconds, it's so frightening that Ben's cousin's hair supposedly turned completely white. And it goes so fast that Joe's next door neighbor's stomach came loose and ended up stuck in his own neck, and he had to have an operation. And apparently he'll show you the stitches if you ask him. So our narrator's reeling back the stories that the other children have told him about Cosmic. And as I read that description, I wonder if it reminded you of maybe perhaps a ride that you've been on. Despite these obvious drawbacks, everyone said they were going to go on it, until we got there and discovered there was a height requirement, namely a wooden Martian holding his arm straight out and a speech bubble that said, "If you can walk under my arm, you can't take the Cosmic." So that's quite common in lots of sort of theme park rides where you have to then you have to meet height restrictions. So anybody who's shorter than the height requirement would not be allowed on the ride despite of their age. So it's not to do with how old you are, but how tall you are. Everyone could easily walk under the arm, except me. It only came up to my shoulder. "Okay," said the man, "you're on." See what I mean about height versus age? It's a height requirement, not an age requirement. Everyone was moaning, saying it wasn't fair and saying how rubbish it was being a kid and how they wished they were grown-ups. That's what they said. In fact, they were all blatantly relieved that they weren't tall enough. So he doesn't quite believe his friends. He's saying they're acting like, "Oh no, we couldn't get on the ride," but actually he knows that they're quite relieved because they've heard those stories about how scary the ride is. The man said, "You'll need someone to go on with you. It's 2 at a time or no ride." I looked at Mrs. Hayes, our teacher. She shrugged. "Are you allowed on it if you're pregnant?" "No," said the man, but you could hardly hear him because everyone was so excited by the news that Mrs. Hayes was having a baby. "No one else?" said the man, and everyone looked at the responsible parent who had very kindly accompanied our group, namely my dad. He always comes on these things because he's a taxi driver, so he can choose what hours he works. Florida Kirby kept nudging him. "Go on, Mr. Digby, go on. My dad would do it if he was here. My dad's dead brave." She more or less shoved him past the Martian and up the ramp. The man waved us into the cage and fastened us both in. I remember Dad saying, Has anyone ever died on this?" And the man glared at him. No, he said, no one has ever died on my ride. Only asking, said Dad. Then the man shut the door of the cage, looked at us through the bars and said, but there's always a first time. If we'd said, let me out, then it wouldn't have done any good, because straight away this incredibly loud music started up and dry ice fog came pouring into the cage and lights were bouncing around us. They really believed in a big build-up. Dad gripped my hand and shouted, don't be scared, Liam. Before I could say, I'm not scared, something went bang and we were rocketing through the air. There's a horrible crushing feeling like a big fist squeezing you into a ball. Then at the top of it, it just lets go of you and you feel lighter than air and not scared of anything at all, as though all the fear had been squeezed out of you. The second bounce was nearly as high as the first, but it wasn't even a bit frightening. We sat there, the two of us, laughing madly while we waited for the elastic to calm down. We bounced 5 more times. When we got off, I was tingling all over and everything around me looked sort of more in focus than usual. Everything was crispier and brighter. The boys were all hanging around the wooden Martian, shouting and yelling and cheering. The girls were still hanging around Mrs. Hayes, asking her about the baby. I realised we'd only been up there for about 2 minutes. Florida Kirby said, are you going to be sick? No. Julie Johnson was sick on the girls' train. She seemed to think that if I knew this, I might agree to be sick just to fit in. Florida Kirby is obsessed with 2 things, celebrities and being sick. Give her a sick celebrity and she's in heaven. I said, that was golden. Can we do it again? Dad said, not with me, you can't. But, Liam, what you've just had was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and now you've had it. He went off to play on the hook a duck. Wayne Ogunsiji was with him, and the two of them got into this profound conversation about Liverpool's defence. That's the football team's defence. Dad said they were weak at the back. Wayne said they were solid at the back, but they couldn't really distribute properly. Every now and then I'd see the cage of the Cosmic shoot up over the top of the other rides, twisting and turning like a moon shot from a cannon, and part of me thought, I've done that. And the rest of me thought, I've got to do it again. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Hayes marched us off to the special exit they've got just for school parties. I carried on watching for one last glimpse of the Cosmic. I must have drifted a bit out of line, because when I tried to walk through the gate, the security man said, could you stand aside a moment, sir? I stood aside and watched everyone else leaving. When Dad went by, he was so busy mentally managing Liverpool FC with Wayne Ogunsiji, he didn't even glance at me. As soon as Dad had gone through, the security guard closed the door and said to me, the main exit's over there, mate. This is school kids only. So the security guard doesn't realise that he's also a school kid. He's saying, actually, this is not your exit. He thought I was grown up. People always think I'm older than I am. But no one had taken me for an actual grown-up before. So let's see what he does next, now that he's being treated or like a grown-up. And I'll be back with part 2 of chapter 3 tomorrow.